Welcome to the most recent Highwire Best Practice webinar. This webinar is on accessibility compliance for scholarly publishers preparing for the EAA and ADA Title II. The just a little bit of housekeeping to start. Whoops. The webinar is being recorded. Just making sure, Kushal, the webinar is being recorded right now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. And this recording will be shared after the meeting. And also the question and answer box is available for you to ask questions as we go. We will be saving those questions for the discussion part of the webinar. And so that, but we encourage you to put those questions into the question and answer box as you think of them. And we will be collecting those and making sure that we get as many of them answered as we can. We have a slight technical problem at the moment, in that our featured speaker, Bill Kasdorf, is still trying to join the webinar.
No,
And so,
I've been here for quite a while, Tony.
oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've been here since you started talking. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, good. Then never mind. We don't have that slight technical difficulty. Excellent. So I will just say that these are our topics and the presenters. I am going to hand it over to Bill to really take this forward. And just again, a reminder that we really want you to put those questions into the question and answer box so that we can have a really useful discussion at the end. Everybody will be introducing themselves as we go. So thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing. And Bill, it's over to you.
Okay. Make sure you're seeing my screen.
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Kasdorf. I'm a publishing technology consultant, and I focus on primarily editorial and production workflows. I'm a big standards advocate. I'm a member of a bunch of different organizations like the W3C, NISO, BISG, etc. I like to keep up to date on standards because I think standards are really essential to getting things right. And I would say that given that I have that focus for the last at least 5 or 6 years, the majority of my consulting has actually been on accessibility, because that's, people are finally giving that some attention. And actually, especially once EAA came out, the publishers are feeling like they can't consider it sounds good maybe later, like they used to, like we used to call SGML before there was XML. Anyway, so the first thing I want to stress is, oops, let me see if I can make sure I'm advancing my screen. So first of all, I'm showing us a guy in a white shirt clutching his face, looking like he's just in utter panic. And I am pointing out that that is not how you should be reacting to this situation. This is a slide with a guy, professorial looking guy in a suit and tie, holding his hands, palms up, in kind of a reassuring, calm down gesture, saying, don't panic. So basically, it's true. This is not a trivial challenge, but most publishers are taking concrete steps toward compliance. I can speak from personal experience that as I take on new clients, almost all of them are in the middle of their journey to getting everything accessible, not just finally turning their attention to it. And what that's doing is really making the publishing ecosystem better for everybody. So this is actually a really good development long term. One thing that I want to start with, especially since our topic is the EAA and the ADA Title II, is one thing that people really misunderstand is the difference between regulations, guidelines, and specifications. So the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, and the ADA are regulations. What often puzzles people or disappoints people or shocks people is, they're telling you what you must do, but they don't tell you how to do it, right? They're not a specification. So if you want to look in the EAA directive for how you're supposed to mark up your EPUBs, it doesn't tell you. So the next step is, well, first of all, let me get more into what these two are about. The EAA is focused on digital products and services. So it's basically kind of public or private sector focused. And one of the difficulties with the EAA is that its enforcement is the job of the 27 member states. And if you want to consider the UK that's decided to align with the EAA, there's really 28. And they're not all the same. So, and we don't even know what many of them are yet. A lot of those regulations are just being developed, et cetera. So that's a little bit of a conundrum right now. And of course, the penalties are unclear as well. ADA Title II, in contrast, is about web content and web apps, and it's got a more public sector focus. So publishers might think, well, that's not about us. Well, yes, it is about you because it applies to government agencies, public libraries, public schools, colleges, universities. And if those are customers or potential customers of yours, you're going to have to get your products accessible because they're obligated by ADA Title II, which takes effect in the end of April 2026. So just not quite a year after the EAA comes into effect, which is this June, the end of June. But one good thing about these two is, in effect, they both effectively require WCAG AA conformance. So what do I mean by WCAG? WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines from the W3C. They are also not specifications, but what they do is define success criteria. So let me give you a couple of examples. For a website, the example I've always used is a form field on a website. A person that can't see the screen, can't see the website visually, first thing is they have to be able to find that form field. And once they find it, they have to know what are they supposed to fill in to that form field. And once they've done that, they need to know, is it filled in properly or not, et cetera. And all of those things can be done in the web markup that's governing that website. But that's what's essential for that form field. An issue that's more of concern to book and journal publishers, most of the people in this audience, the big one is image descriptions. I don't need to that's no revelation to anybody. But there's often a confusion that, first of all, most people now, I think, realize that there's really two different kinds of image descriptions. You notice I didn't call them alt text, I called them image descriptions. Alt text is just a brief little plain text expression that's actually the attribute of the image tag in a publication. So it can't get into much detail. For an image that does convey a lot of information, you need what's called an extended description, used to be called a long description. And oftentimes people think, well, okay, there's different levels of WCAG conformance. I mentioned before, WCAG AA is what you should be shooting for. But folks often think, well, WCAG, one level of WCAG, maybe A, maybe AA, only requires the alt text. And the next level up, either AA or AAA, whichever they're confused by, that's where you have to have your extended descriptions. Actually, no. At each level of conformance, they're all the same from the point of view of WCAG, because the success criteria in WCAG is that you need to provide a textual equivalent of an image that conveys the information that that image conveys to a sighted user. So it's really not a matter of which level requires you to do that. WCAG just fundamentally requires you to do that. So that's I'm sure that's not good news to a lot of you, because particularly scientific STM scholarly publishers, educational publishers, Rachel will get into that. Stacy will get into the scholarly and STM side. Images can be very complex, and it's not easy to get those descriptions done. But that's one of the issues that publishers are working on. And then finally, EPUB Accessibility 1.1, also a W3C recommendation, part of the EPUB 3.3 recommendation. Those are actual specifications. So that gives you the HTML markup and metadata that you need to ensure that your publications conform to WCAG. So, pardon me. So first step, obviously, is see how far off you are in your publications and your websites for conforms to WCAG. So once you've identified the issues, it really involves educating everybody in the workflow. It really starts with, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but even the authors, because I'm a big advocate for typically for scholarly publishing, that the authors should at least provide a draft image description to go with every image, because they know what they're trying to convey with that image. It's a bit different in education because those tend to be commissioned, but again, they're often commissioned early in the workflow. So the main message here is that really everybody in the editorial and production workflow has a role to play in accessibility. So what are the issues that I see most often in my work? Boilerplate metadata all the time. So I'll give you an example. It's an extreme example, but it's not an uncommon example. I've seen, I've done this work for many, many publishers, and I would say at least half of them, and maybe a majority of them, I see a book that is just plain text, right? Yes, it's got chapters, but it doesn't have any subheadings. It's just plain text. And the metadata, the accessibility metadata, says that there's structural navigation. Well, no, that's not true, because there's no heading structure in this thing. The metadata says that there's MathML, but there's no math in this thing. The metadata says that they've got image descriptions, but there are no images in this thing. Literally, I'm not making that up. I see this all the time. What that means is the vendor, likely not the publisher, the vendor that created that EPUB file, is just mindlessly putting the same metadata in every file. Don't let them do that. Check the metadata. Similar issue is useless alt text. I see it again all the time. Yes, all the images have alt text, so that if you just simply run ACE by DAISY and you don't look at any of the details, you just look at the top level report, it says, okay, you've got image descriptions for every image, good for you. But if you look at what it says the image descriptions are, the alt text are, oftentimes they all are just the word image or the word figure or something else that's just generic and useless. So you need meaningful alt text. Non-semantic HTML is also a big issue, and this is kind of a relic of an old strategy of making EPUBs look like the book. So oftentimes the markup in the EPUB, and I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here, but the tags in the book are really just two. There are P's for paragraphs and divs for undifferentiated sections of content. And they use the class attribute to distinguish them. So you'll get P equals H2, P equals H, P class equals H2, P class equals H3. And what that does is it makes it completely useless to a person using assistive technology, because assistive technology is designed to understand HTML semantics. So you're already putting the H2 tag there in a class attribute, put it as the tag instead. A couple others, because I don't want to eat up too much time with this introduction, is your links really need to have either the text of the link has to fully describe what the link is linking to, or you need a title or a label on it. And you can't use only color to distinguish links. This is really common, that it's, the links are all blue. Well, for a colorblind person, that's not too helpful. Just put an underscore as well. That's easy solution. Text as image. Oftentimes a chapter opener, for example, has fancy fonts or something like that, and it's really just an image. The text should be in the alt text. The text of it, if text that's meant to be read should be in the alt text. Obviously, say a picture of a page of a Bible, for example, that's there. That you're not intended to read that page. So no, you don't put the text of that page in the alt text. Tables that are images, again, just use HTML tables, which they probably were upstream in your workflow, because that's how assistive technology will read them. And the column and row headers need to be tagged. And then language tagging is important. So step 3 is, you can't do all this at once. And also, many of you, some of these things are things that you do internally with your editorial and production staff, but many of the things are maybe also done by your vendors. One thing that publishers realize very quickly is that the issues for frontlist and the issues for backlist are very different. So, obviously most publishers are at least working on getting their frontlist in good shape, but backlist can be a challenge. I've got clients that have 60, 70, 80,000 books in their backlist. That is going to take a while for them to get those accessible. They're typically prioritizing based on the demand in the market. Also, don't just do the easy. I mean, yes, do the easiest things, but the easiest things aren't necessarily the most important thing. So don't think that you're doing what you can by just doing the easiest things. And then, because I mentioned that everybody in your workflow really has a role to play, these things can be done simultaneously. So, you're up in the editorial stage is a good time to get the image descriptions in the works. And maybe even language tags, because your editors and your copy editors are the only ones in the workflow that actually literally read the whole text. So they're able, while they're in there, if they can say, whoa, this is a chunk of Spanish here, that's the time to flag that. And just some closing remarks on strategies. I mentioned Ace by Daisy, just an indispensable tool for testing EPUBs, and Thorium is an e-reader, also from the EDR lab in Europe, but it's really a highly engineered and highly standards-based reading system. So use those two, but make sure you keep them up to date, because they get updated. I did an analysis for a client where I pointed out to them that they shouldn't be calling using the EPUB type for page breaks. They should just use doc equals page break. And they told their vendors to do that. The vendor said, wait a minute, I ran ACE and I still get the same error, that it's telling me that if I use doc page break, it's wrong. Well, guess what? That was a glitch in ACE, that when I raised the issue with the publisher and their vendor, I talked to the developer of ACE, and he said, "Oh my God, you're right, that's wrong." And he updated ACE so that, yes, you should use the doc page break. Anyway, just an example that just using them, it's really easy for them to get out of date. So that's something to keep an eye on. Provide really detailed feedback to your vendors. Most of these others I've mentioned, and I'm using more time than I intended. So I think what I will do is turn it over to Stacy for our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I think Tony is going to kindly share my slides.
Yes. One moment.
Thank you.
And almost there. There we go. Let's see. I'm going to now hit share. And everybody should be able to see your slides. Is that right, Bill or Josh?
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay, great.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll get started. Welcome everybody, and thank you to Highwire for having me to speak at this session. So this is Access Granted, Taylor and Francis's roadmap to inclusive publishing. And we like to say inclusive publishing instead of accessible publishing because we want to create products that are inclusive for everybody and steer away from this idea that people with additional reading requirements need something completely different to somebody who does not have any additional reading requirements. Actually, if you make something accessible, fully inclusive, then everybody can enjoy it. Nobody's ever picked up an accessible book and gone, oh, that's awful. Doesn't work for me. So I am Stacey Scott, and I am the head of accessibility for Taylor and Francis Publishing. Among other things, I'm also the chair of the Publishing Accessibility Action Group UK. So as someone who is completely blind, I have many years, or not too many, but many years of both personal and professional experience in accessible publishing and education and inclusion. One thing to know about me, I hate unscrambling eggs, and that'll become clearer as we go along through the presentation. Next slide, please. So who are Taylor and Francis? So we are a scholarly publisher. Luckily, we're in the right space here. We provide both HSS and STEM content. We provide over 180,000 ebooks in total, and roughly 2,700 journals each year. Our mission is to foster human progress through knowledge, and we like to reflect this mission through our work in accessible publishing. We like to consider ourselves strong partners and allies in the accessible publishing community. Next slide, please. Carrots or consequences. So a question that comes up a lot, more than you would think it would, is why make your content accessible? Either because it's the right thing to do, or because it will drive business your way, or because changes in standards and legislation will soon be upon us all. TNF has been moving forward on accessible publishing for over 10 years now, and we like to think our work complements as well as adheres to this various legislations and standards. So as Bill mentioned, there are various rules and regs, but the two celebrities at the moment are the European Accessibility Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And if you've been working in publishing and haven't heard of these until now, then this webinar will be a very appropriate proverbial eye-opener. So EAA, as Bill mentioned, coming up very soon in the rear view, will soon be in the rear view in June 2025. And the Americans with Disabilities Act in April 2026. Again, as mentioned by Bill, these can actually be conquered quite nicely in harmony by adhering to those web content accessibility guidelines AA that Bill wonderfully detailed. So that's certainly the good. So the good news there is the changes that you make towards accessibility compliance for the European Accessibility Act will not diverge you from anything you need to do for the Americans with Disabilities Act. You will only be doing work for both of those, so no duplication or alternative methods required. But what is the impact of exclusion through lack of accessibility? And that's something that is very important to think about. Whether it's for legal reasons or moral ones, you cannot forever ignore the rights of people, as the detrimental impact of doing that could actually be quite catastrophic. So believe me, I am speaking from personal experience. So to briefly speak about myself, so when I went to university, I decided to study what we would class as health and social science type subjects. So it was psychology, sociology, education, things like that. And what that meant was it was journal after journal after journal, book after book after book that needed to be chopped up and scanned page by page by me. Most of the time, those pages would go in and they would be upside down, back to front, or the quality just would not be good enough for the scanner, which meant I could not then use my text-to-speech software to read them. And I promise I spent no time in the student bar because I had to spend every minute scanning my content. It was so extreme for me that actually I ended up switching to study mathematics, because for me, mathematics didn't require any books. It required listening and learning and basically working it through as you went along. And so although it is more visual, I found that easier than having to deal with all of the inaccessible journals and books that I was being given back then. This was in sort of 2005 type time. Flash forward 20 years, however, I decided to study again a different subject, and business and management and leadership, and I did it with digital content through a platform called Bookshare, where I had instant access to so many books online, and they were so many of them were fully accessible, and the experience for me was like night and day. It was absolutely transformative to be able to do that. And so for me, the proof is in the pudding. Having digital books available, having them readily available and fully accessible, I really can't tell you how much of a difference that really makes. And for me, it meant full independence of my studies. And I'll be honest, I did go to the bar. I was able to go to the bar. But this is a key reason why people like me, TNF, and so many dedicated people like the wonderful people on this panel today have worked in accessible publishing since dinosaurs started reading. It's so important. Next slide, please. So the 3 E's. So let's start with the 3 key areas of the European Accessibility Act, the 3 E's. So the E's could stand for excited, equitable, evolving, enabling. They could, and for so a lot of us, they do. But in the context of the EAA, they also stand for ebooks, e-readers, and e-commerce. And these are 3 key components that I'm going to talk about today. Next slide, please. So as promised, ebooks. So for TNF, as mentioned, we have 180,000 ebooks now in EPUB 3. 18,000 files to be 100% accessible by June 2025. And what that means is all accessibility features incorporated, including image descriptions. The backlist will be worked on to be made fully accessible by 2030. So at the moment, all new titles are now created accessible by our vendors, but going back to Bill's point, they then get checked by us, and we have a wonderful software, in-house built software, that flags to us anytime that a lot of like different rules. So when a vendor sends stuff through to us, we make sure that we check, actually, have you been cheeky? Have you done some of the things that Bill mentioned? And then if they have, then they get a lot of telling off. But they also get a lot of guidance. We don't expect vendors just to know what we require, what's needed. And so we are more than happy to support our vendors in providing exactly what we need, because it's better for our customers and it's better for us. So we are targeting 2030 for full inclusion. So this means that our documents will have all accessibility features. So for example, semantic markup, and structured navigation. So our ebook content is designed with a logical reading order and includes that semantic markup and headings for easy navigation, as Bill talked about, and compatibility with assistive technologies like screen readers and the use of keyboard navigation. Our EPUBs also support magnification and reflow of content, allowing users to adjust the font for their own needs. One of the other key things that we are working on now, and we will be doing for at least the next 5 years on the backlist and forever going forward, is so image descriptions, as Bill mentioned. So we take the all hands on deck approach. So all hands or eyes make for lighter work. So we work with authors who we consider to be the first subject matter experts, editorial to support the process, and our in-house production team, and vendors for all of our front end content. And again, the image descriptions, they come back, they get checked by both humans and through our software sort of detection tool, if you like. This leaves our in-house production team to tackle the backlist beast by 2030 to ensure that all of our books will be fully accessible. Because I've come across a lot of publishers who say, oh yeah, our books are accessible, and they have the markup and they have the heading structure, and that's fantastic, but they don't have image description. And so for me, that's a great start, but it's not a fully accessible book. Another thing to mention is, we talk about subject matter experts, we talk about the author, the vendors. Bear in mind that your end users are also the subject matter experts, because they're the ones who'll be using that text-to-speech software and deciding, does that make sense? Deciphering an image, what it looks like based on a description. So please, where you can, always involve end users. It's really, really important. Who's first in the queue? That's a question that comes up a lot when it comes to, well, what do we describe first? For us at T&F, we think it's important to not only start with the most popular titles, but to ensure we have the most popular titles across a vast variety of our subjects, so as not to accidentally omit important work. So we could be focusing, for example, quite a lot on HSS titles, but you might argue actually the STEM titles are more in need of description. And so we have quite a variety of images that we work across, not just the ones that are the highest grossing or the most popular. Of course, can't mention image descriptions without mentioning AI solutions. So we are currently working with a third-party vendor to provide AI solutions for backlist content. So we just finished a trial, so the use of it on our backlist will start very, very soon. It's a really good solution for getting the bones of an image description in place before finessing it. But the thing I always say is never leave the engine running. It must always be checked by a human to make sure that it is meaningful and accurate. And it's so important. Can you imagine if your AI described an image and actually it wrote something offensive? It described a person in a certain way that was offensive, and that went out into the world because it hadn't been checked. We live in a very strong cancel culture. I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that, because it can absolutely apply to us all. And then finally, one of the key things that we've had in place for a very long time is a VIP request mailbox. So where we don't have a title yet fully accessible, we have a dedicated team where somebody can email them directly and say, this is what I need. It's essential that customers can access a designated contact person or team immediately who can get them an accessible version so that they're not held back in their studies. We've had this in place in TNF since 2010, I believe, and we've processed over 32,000 requests since then. Of course, these have diminished, the requests have diminished a lot over the years. Metadata matters, absolutely, as Bill mentioned again. Don't hide that metadata under a bushel. It would be so unfortunate for you to spend the resource and the dedication to making your content accessible and not putting it out there, not shining that light. Tell people that it's there. When people go to a platform, what if they are downloading an inaccessible copy of a book when you've made a fully accessible version? That customers need to know what accessibility functionality is in that book, and that comes from the metadata. And otherwise it's wasting time, and you might be again just missing out on a huge customer base when you've done the work, you've done the hard bit. Okay, next slide, please. As promised, next, e-readers. So basically, it's all for nothing if it can't be seen, heard, or felt. And what I mean by that is, can it be used by people with magnification? Can it be used by people using text to speech like me? Can it be put through a braille output so it can actually be used by either paper braille, someone using paper braille, or electronic braille? This is again hugely important, and it depends on, a lot of it depends on the choices that you make in terms of the e-reader vendors that you work with. You need to make sure that you are putting your content places that people can access them. It's a huge problem again where you could put your books, make them fully accessible, put them through to a vendor, and a lot of that accessibility will be stripped out. So when you're having conversations and you're bringing on new vendors to provide e-reading solutions, have that conversation. Is it accessible? Ask them their accessibility journey, compliance, next steps. It's so important, and again, that includes the metadata display. Does that e-reader allow the metadata, the accessibility metadata, to be displayed? So TNF have decided for us, we went down the route of actually building our own e-reader. And it just gives us control in making sure that customers have a smooth and fully inclusive reading experience, and that we're able to adapt that e-reader as specifications change over time. Next slide, please. And finally, and in the E's, we're looking at e-commerce. So basically, as I say, don't throw those purple pounds down the pan. So purple pound is the term used for the spending power of people with disabilities, and so there are a lot of people who have disabilities, who have money they want to spend, and they want to spend it on things that are fully accessible and inclusive. And so if for no other reason, it would be, again, such a shame to spend so much time and resource in making content and e-readers accessible, but not making the means to actually purchase things accessible. The journey is equally as important. So making sure that, it's not just the bit where you need to take the money that's accessible, but the whole checkout and purchase experience. And this can also include any correspondence pertaining to that order as well. Next slide, please. So we do a lot of work on journals, as you can imagine, with nearly 3,000 every year. I won't focus too much on this, but this is what we're looking at for the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's not part of the European Accessibility Act yet, but it could very much well be in a future iteration of that directive. But certainly for the Americans with Disabilities Act, it is. So we have 100% of our journals available in PDF, EPUB, and HTML, and we've had that in place since 2019 to give users that variety of choice. So that's over 1 million articles. So a fifth of everything that we produce is in these formats, the more accessible EPUB format. We have a built-in e-reader for that as well called ReadSpeak. So that basically allows people to click and read it with audio. It enriches the content. You can have highlighting. You could change the font and the style. And so again, it just tries to offer that inclusive experience to as wide a range of readers as possible. So again, lining up for the ADA, where, journals are not yet covered, by starting to think about it and taking these steps that we have done already. So we need to do more work on our EPUBs. We want to make them more accessible with more accessibility features built in, like our EPUB books. I'm talking about EPUB journals. And we want to make sure that we have more image descriptions. So we're running a trial, but that is a trial, and we want to make sure that we have more of that in place. Yes, as part of compliance with ADA, but also, as we started in 2019 with this, it is also just part of what we want to be doing as a business. Next slide, please. So just briefly, beyond the bare essentials. So these are some things that, again, they're not specifically mentioned as part of the EAA, but they're very important. So platforms. So this is where I talk a lot about unscrambling it. I mean, I talk about it a lot in books and journals as well. What I mean by that is, particularly if you are starting to build a platform or a website, you need to consider accessibility from the beginning, because if you don't, and this goes for books as well, if you don't, then eventually you're going to be told, can you go back and unscramble that egg? Now, is it easier to unscramble the egg, or is it easier just to make the egg perfect from the start? We all know the answer to that. If you build accessibility in at the beginning, you will save yourself time, resource, and money. It's a no-brainer. And I come across so many things, whether it's software, books, platforms, and they say, oh, so we've built this. How do we make it accessible now? And I'm like, well, you need to go back and strip this and redo this and take away this. And and actually, had they have asked me the question at the beginning and we work together, none of that would be necessary. So it's really important. Again, consider accessibility. You get your end users involved at the start as well for testing before you even go live with anything. Ancillary materials, so not specifically covered under the European Accessibility Act, but many of these materials are contained within ebooks. And so Taylor and Francis have decided that an ebook is not fully accessible unless all components of that book are fully accessible. And so we've set up various task force groups to start getting that done, to make sure that anything that accompanies an ebook is also embedded in a workflow to make sure that it's fully accessible when it goes along with that book. Marketing and communication, again, the more you can do to make your tweets or your LinkedIn posts, your emails more accessible. Some of these are very, very basic things. But these are just internal documents and systems as well. It's not just the stuff that's going to make you money. There's a lot of stuff around your reputation, and also attracting diverse talent to your workplace and bringing in those people with lived experience. So these are just some other aspects to think about down the line. Next slide, please. So to take the proverb, it takes a village. So the power of community and partnerships. So this is about, what's a good step forward when you're thinking, well, this is all great, we want to do this, but how do we move forward? So building an internal accessibility strategy group. I cannot tell you how impactful that was at Taylor and Francis. I think we would have struggled to move had it have just been me or another colleague waving our hand in the air saying, hey, this is important. So what we did is we brought people from all across the business into an accessibility working group or strategy group. And this helped us, secure buy-in from leadership through united action and strategy, because it wasn't just one person, it was 50 people across the business talking about accessibility, wanting to move forward on it, requesting it in budgets, and really helping to push it up the ladder. It's definitely easier to push these things as a group rather than just one person. And it doesn't matter how big your publisher. We had 50 people from across a lot of departments. If you're a publisher and you've got 10 colleagues, there's your accessibility working group right there. It can be all 10 of you. That would be perfect. Then every single person in that company is on board. But it makes a huge difference. Sing from the same hymn sheet, as they say. Next slide, please. So my final slide for you today, your best resource, the Accessible Publishing Network. So I cannot stress this enough. There are so many fabulous groups and organizations and people who can support you on this journey. We learn together, and it's a very welcoming and collaborative space. So you could go to, for example, Daisy. So they have a lot of resources, and as Bill mentioned, they've got Daisy Ace Checker, they've got their inclusive publishing program. There's a lot to discover there. There's obviously the Publishing Accessibility Action Group that I chair, completely free. We're on LinkedIn. We have a very active mailing list, and we meet every couple of months online. And any topic as well is welcome to up for discussion, and it's completely free. So again, if you want to know about that, please get in touch. Bookshare, I mentioned earlier, please do look up Bookshare if you don't supply your content to them yet, because it's fully secure and it's a fully accessible end user platform. So people, students or supporting staff, anyone who's eligible and signed up can search for the book, download the book in a format that works for them. And it's been a privilege for Taylor and Francis to publish with both Bookshare and the UK equivalent RNIB Bookshare. So, and finally, you can always reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to hear from any of you. So my email address is there. It's stacey.scott@tandf.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacey. And I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Hello. I'm just going to get my screen shared, and hopefully everybody can see my slide deck. I've never actually had to follow Stacey in a webinar, and so I'm a little bit intimidated, but I will do my best. So I'm going to talk to you about preparing an accessibility program in higher education. And let's see if this is going to let me. There we go. So my name is Rachel Comerford. I'm the Senior Director of Accessibility at Macmillan Learning. For those of you who are interested, I'm a white woman with long brown hair. My professional photo looks like I'm smirking at the camera through my glasses, and the full version of this looks like I'm about to sell you some sketchy real estate. So after years in sales, editorial and online content development, I sort of accidentally found myself in the world of accessibility, but this has really become my home. So I have more than a decade of experience in this field, more than 2 decades of experience in publishing and education, and sometimes it even feels like I know what I'm talking about. I make no promises. And a little bit about Macmillan. Macmillan is a digital learning company, and we have a mission to inspire what's possible for every learner. So we know that learning doesn't just happen in classrooms. It doesn't happen during specific hours of the day. It happens all the time. It happens wherever we are. And so we're committed to creating resources that will engage, support, and meet students where they are. I want to give you an idea of where we are on our accessibility journey. But in order to do that, I want to tell you where we started. So our program is more than a decade old now, and we've won international recognition for the work that we've done. But when it started as most accessibility programs do, with baby steps. So we started with problems that were clear-cut, they're easy to solve, and had relatively low workflow impact. There's things like closed captionings because we could add them to the video when it was finalized, alt text because we could create it alongside our program, and becoming members of organizations like the ones that Stacy just talked about, like Bookshare, and in the US, Access Text Network, which supplies accessible books for higher education institutions. From those first few steps, the program sort of exploded. So we updated our ebook format to EPUB, and eventually we were the first publisher recognized by Benetech with their Global Certified Accessible program. And then, excuse me, we also dug deeper into content and platform issues by partnering with third-party consultants. So we developed a regular meeting cadence to support team members across the organization and to make sure that they had the answers that they needed to take ownership of their own accessibility responsibilities. And then we also began coordinating meetings with customers so that we could better understand their needs. And we set up our own advisory board, working with people that are in disability services offices, instructors that have disabilities, instructors that are teaching students with disabilities, so that they could tell us more about what their needs were in the classroom and on campus. So once we got into the early 2020s, we had a chance to look a little bit more inward. So we created an ERG for employees that have disabilities, and we received recognition as a top workplace for disability inclusion. And now we're just sort of trying to keep the momentum going. And so we're working towards integrating accessibility testing earlier and earlier in the processes. We're creating company-wide trainings that emphasize our accessibility principles and our requirements, and we're trying to set objectives for the future. I think getting started on an accessibility program is probably the most daunting part. So I'm going to start by backtracking to the baby steps that I talked about. It is really hard to have a successful program without having an understanding of what the issues are that you're trying to tackle. And so an audit of your current product, of your current program, your current content, it's going to be really key to make it better. The results should give you some insight into the impact of each problem that you're facing. So how much a criterion will improve accessibility for users with disabilities, and the effort. So the relative complexity, the time or resources to change, to make that change. Those statuses might be expressed in different ways. Like some people will size their impact by t-shirt sizes or whatever fun, agile terminology your teams like to use. But basically what it comes down to is low, medium, and high. And when you have that info, you can use it to build a prioritization matrix. In a frictionless world, this matrix would be exactly the same for absolutely everyone, and it would make our lives really easy, and we would know exactly where and how different criteria fell in terms of impact and effort. But it varies in real life. So effort may change depending on how your product is being used, and impact might change depending on who your audience is. This can take some work. You don't have to go it alone, though. There are certainly colleagues that you can ask for help. There are third-party consultants that you can work with, of course. And you can even ask AI for help. And I've included a sample prompt. So you can prompt the AI with something like, my product is X. For us, it would be the Achieve learning platform. And my audience is Y. So college students from freshman to senior year. And then based on these descriptions, provide an impact versus effort matrix and follow it with a summary of where I can have quick wins, as well as longer-term strategic investments. And remember that the more specific you are in X and Y, the more tailored the answer is going to be from AI. And the matrix is really key in terms of helping you shape a plan going forward. You want to look at high impact, low effort areas, to start. And those will be your short-term wins. Picking a short-term win from that matrix, my approach to making sure that you're not just solving the immediate problem for something that's live and ready for customers, but also solving the longer term problem of making sure that it's a part of your overall program. So once your matrix is complete, you break it down into 4 steps. And so for me, the first step is learning. If you don't know enough about the topic already, spend some time looking for resources to better understand it. And I included an example here. If one of your quick wins is to fix color contrast issues, then webaim.org has some great articles about contrast requirements and how they work. It's also the time that you can look for tools. So also at webaim.org, you can check out their contrast checker. Once you feel like you have a good understanding, you can move to the second step, which is about teaching. It's about sharing. You take what you've learned and you find the teams that are responsible for color contrast. So you talk to design teams, you talk to user experience teams, and work through the principles of the requirement with them. You can share the resources you found, you share the tools that you found, and kind of set a deadline to come back to so that you can meet and talk through any questions that come up. Then you assign. And for me, this is sometimes the most difficult part, but accessibility is everyone's responsibility. And that means that instead of you as the quote unquote accessibility team of 1 or 2 or 3, which is often the case, or even a half a person, as we've seen with their attention split to other responsibilities, you can't check every image in the backlist, in the front list, and everything in between. Checking color contrast should become part of business as usual for the teams that you trained. But you can never fully let the responsibility go. And so step 4 is to track. Progress can and will stop when no one is looking. So if you can decide on a method of tracking, like the % images without contrast testing or whatever makes sense for your team, and run a regular status meeting to see change over time. And don't forget that when a team has success, and it's the invisible 5th step in my plan, you should celebrate it. You should let everyone know what your colleagues did, how they did it, and why it matters, and make others want to be a part of that celebration as well. And remember that backlists and legacy content is tough and it can be overwhelming. And if you come across an item that you don't see the point of updating because it's rarely or never used, rather than thinking about whether you can get an exception for that content, and this is something that we've tackled, especially with things like video programs, where the number of videos that we have increase and increase and increase over time, but some of the older videos sort of fall off in terms of usage. For us, it's not about, oh, this is exempt because it's rarely used. It's about whether we need to provide that content on a customer-facing product at all. If it's rarely used, is it worth presenting as a part of our program? So quick wins will bring confidence. They get the team invested. They also show customers that you're making a commitment to change. The next piece is much harder. For some areas of accessibility, the responsibility is more spread out, and making a quick change to one like specific area can result in like a lot more problems down the production line. So part of your matrix is going to lead to you understanding where you need to make long-term workflow changes. And to fix your workflow, the first step is to document it, much like the audit in terms of understanding where you need to make changes. So you find places where workflows can be more consistent and operate less on individual wants, like I like to do this way, but more on organizational needs. In order to get all of the alternative text that we need, we have to do it at this point in the process. When you have that, you'll need to identify at least 2 areas in the workflow, one place where the accessibility work, most of it takes place, and another place where the accessibility work can be tested. And the testing can come right after the work is done, but it can also be integrated into larger testing programs. So if you're testing the quality of code, if you're testing the functionality of something, you can include accessibility testing. The next step is to bring your UX team and your engineering team in to scale the solutions. You can use automated testing tools, and you will probably need them. You will also need to do manual testing without question. Everyone is not going to be thrilled with the same solution. And the goal is really to find something that best meets the needs of the primary stakeholders. This is not a small step. You might think you found the right tool and then figure out 6 months down the line that it's not what you expected, but you need to start with something and you need to learn from it and use it to grow your program. So, all right, you have your workflow plan, you're all set. No. So the next step is to document everything. Ask someone uninvolved with the initial decision process if they can follow the steps, then fix the documentation. Don't make yourself the primary point of answering questions, because when you do that, you quickly become overwhelmed and it becomes harder for people to get the answers that they need in the time that they need it. If you have documentation you can point people to, they can start taking ownership of the work themselves. And from there, the steps are really familiar because we talked about them in terms of short-term wins. So you make sure that everyone understands their role in the workflow. You set up time for those parties to report out on what they're doing. And of course, don't forget, you celebrate the wins when something's going right. So what about those roles in the changing processes? An accessibility program doesn't have to and shouldn't be tackled by an accessibility quote unquote team alone. As many of us know, the team is often just that one person or at most a handful of people. But remember that even if you're an accessibility team of one, you are not alone. So Stacy shared some great resources for getting help out of house. In-house, it always helps to look for an executive sponsor that can help spread the word about what needs to be done. And top-down support is often necessary for making shared responsibility work. Documented workflows are going to go a long way to help make changes. But the question you'll inevitably going to be asked is, what specifically do I need to do? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about in-house roles. Again, this is one of those annoying it depends situations where role assignment and job distribution are going to be different wherever you go. Mileage may vary. But I'm going to talk through some high-level roles and the part they can play, and you will, without question, need to tweak this to your own experience. For us, I was looking at designers and how they can do color contrast testing and identify use of color issues, as well as help us with heading structure and organization. I was looking at our editors and how they can do language checks for offensive terms, and they can look at directional language and remove that in favor of labels. And so an example of that is see the figure above, see figure 2.6. So you're directing someone to something specific instead of a general area in hopes that above means something to them. Our production teams, we mentioned ACE, and I think Bill mentioned EPUB check earlier. Those are two tools that can be used to check your EPUBs to make sure that they're up to standards. EPUB check largely checks the code itself, while ACE checks the accessibility specifically. Our production teams are responsible for either running those or making sure that our vendor does. Building and checking against internal specifications. They make sure that we have our own spec that we're maintaining that meets all the requirements for accessibility. Our engineers and product teams are working on prioritizing issues that come up. They help establish standard shared design elements that can be used across our platforms so that we know that not only is it accessible, but it's also consistent for users. Our marketing team will write talking points for our plan to help meet legislative requirements. We know that we're not there, but we also know that we're on our way and that we have a good, solid plan in place to get there. And marketing really helps us to communicate that. They are also responsible for creating accessible marketing materials. If we're going to send out a PDF to someone to describe a product, that PDF is going to work with a screen reader. It's going to have appropriate color contrast. And then our sales team, they need to use the points for talking about accessibility. We don't expect them to be accessibility experts. We don't expect them to know everything, but we do expect them to be able to speak to the specific talking points that we've given them. But they're also responsible for delivering customer questions, requests, and concerns back to our team to address. But it's also not just your colleagues that can and should help. So your authors will play a part in this as well. Will they all do it? No, definitely not. Every one of you has a name in mind of that one person who is definitely never going to agree to do this. But remember that authors are subject matter experts. So they choose language and images with a purpose, hopefully. They use their expertise, and you can use their expertise. You could also use their ego to encourage their contributions. And going forward, you can use their contracts and make it a requirement for the work that they're doing. The most common involvement of authors is the creation of alt text, and it is tricky. Some are going to include too much or redundant information. I've seen alt text that looks like it's a whole second book. Some are going to do the bare minimum. They'll label bar chart. But ideally, you provide them with guidelines that can help them get somewhere in between. There are lots of great alt text guidelines out there. I love a shameless plug. And so if you go to www.macmillanlearning.com/accessibility, we do have some basic alt text guidelines posted there. They probably need a little bit of updating. But it's a starting space. Authors can also give you guidance about heading structure. So not everything is an A head or one head, depending on how you learned. And when you talk through the shape of their book and how information is supposed to flow, it'll give authors a chance to contribute to more than just the structure of the language. And the third way that they can contribute is so simple. Just tell authors that in digital files, they need to give more information than click here or follow this link. The author knows why they're suggesting a specific resource. So you can have them include it in their language. And as an example, I have included another shameless plug, which is that you want to write, instead of click here, something like, for more information about our accessibility work, check out the Macmillan Learning online catalog. And Macmillan Learning Online Catalog is in a different color and underlined, and the link leads to www.macmillanlearning.com accessibility. And the last step in sharing the responsibility of accessibility is to create a procurement plan. So provide transparency around your own accessibility journey, and you ask vendors that you're working with to do the same. Ask potential partners for current, focused, and accurate information about accessibility. This is essential for the purchase and the sale of technology products and services that people with disabilities use. And be sure that to include any vendor in this plan, whether the end result is customer facing or for employees or applicants. Our actual procurement documentation is much longer than what I've shared on this slide, but our program distills to these 4 principles, which are also documented on our website, shameless plug. We expect that all technology will be tested for accessibility during the development process, and at the time of delivery, that the testing protocols and results will be delivered to us and provided in a timely fashion. Suppliers are asked to provide a person/groups in their organization responsible for accessibility, including contact information. It's the responsibility of our suppliers to correct accessibility defaults revealed during the development and testing processes of their product. And we expect our vendors to show their commitment to digital accessibility by maintaining a public accessibility statement. And that is my more than 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. But thank you for the invitation. And I love hearing from people with questions, new ideas, pictures of fuzzy animals. So feel free to reach out to me. My email is rachel.comerford, COMERFORD @macmillan.com. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And we'll now hand it over to Josh.
Great, thanks very much. I'll just sort out my screen share. Okay, great. I'm Joshua Ralph. I manage the hosting platform here at Highwire Press. And so for the last 10 years or so, I've had the pleasure of working with many publishers and societies, many of whom have very small teams. I mean, very, very small teams, sometimes of only 2 or 3 people. And for the most part, when we talk about accessibility, they do not need persuading about the value of the initiative. They totally get it, but they are highly resource constrained. And so many ask, what can they do to get even close to what some of the major publishers are achieving with their larger teams without spending a lot of their budget on it? And it's notable, by the way, we've had several questions in the Q&A about exactly this point. What do I do with even just 1 FTE or less, for example? So we often find ourselves giving practical advice for smaller teams, and our clients tell us which of those bits of advice have been most useful. What I would like to share is the 10 most useful pieces of advice that we regularly give for small resource-constrained teams, and none of them take very long to do, obviously, and many of them echo what has been recommended by the fellow speakers already. So the first one, what do I actually have to do is the most common question. So you do not have to read all 46 pages of the European Accessibility Act, which is ironically not particularly accessible. You simply have to be WCAG 2.1 AA compliant, as has already been noted, but it's worth emphasizing that point. That is what you have to do to comply with these regulations. So that is good news, as many of us are already quite familiar with AA, been working for decades, really. If you are not familiar with AA compliance, how do you become familiar with it? There's lots of great resources out there. What I have found people find actually very useful is completing a VPAT. So a VPAT is the voluntary product accessibility template, I think, and it is required by many institutions, in particular in the US. If you're going to work with them, they require you to have a VPAT. It is a long document where it goes line by line saying exactly what you have to do. And it's actually really clear, because for each criterion, it then links out to the W3 website to give examples of the sorts of things that you have to do. So aside from being something you have to do, it's also a great training resource. So for example, there you can see on point 1.4.13, content on hover on focus, it just shows that if the cursor is going over something which then conceals some content, there must be a really easy way to unconceal that content. It's kind of obvious, all of these points, but they do need to be addressed one by one. As has also been noted a couple of times in this webinar, being accessible from the start really saves a great deal of time overall. If you've got millions of articles already out there, you're going to have to unscramble some eggs, as Stacey mentioned earlier. So making the XML accessible from the start, getting your authors to actually create the alt text where possible from the start will definitely save you a whole bunch of time in the long run. I'm also regularly sent URLs by smaller publishers asking, is this accessible? And the good news is you can do this yourself in about 2 minutes, as illustrated on the right-hand side of this page, which is a Chrome window. If you simply right-click in Chrome, click on Inspect, click on Lighthouse, Accessibility, Analyze Page Load, and then Chrome does that automatically for you in about a minute. It gives you a report out of 100 and lists the things that need to change to increase your score. But it's very straightforward to do that without any technical expertise. And then you can go to your vendors if there are any issues to help them update their site. And speaking of vendors, you are, of course, absolutely well within your rights to demand it from your vendors, be they website platforms or XML content creators, anything like that. They will all have some sort of accessibility statement, so you can ask them what they are complying with, And if they're not complying, hold them to account. It is within your contracts that they should be able to provide that as a service. So if they're creating content, that could be making sure the alt text is meaningful. If it was designing a website or exchanging designs about the website, making sure the color contrast is appropriate, but which, as I think is also noted earlier, is probably our most common challenge. People not understanding that color contrast for some is not does not make for easily readable text for others. And there's an example on the right-hand side there, which to many will be very easy to read, but to millions, or hundreds of millions of people potentially, that text is going to be completely unreadable. So it should not be not featuring in designs of your website. AI for accessibility where appropriate, and there's a lot to say on this point, of course, but I personally have confidence that AI will help a lot with accessibility over time. Right now, I think we need to proceed with caution. And so anything which simply makes an existing task that you have more efficient, fantastic, that's nice and low risk, such as detecting which images have completely meaningless alt text. That's the image on the right-hand side of the page, illustrating completely meaningless alt text. It just says an image. But for generating novel content, like actually creating the alt text in the first place, actually we need to proceed with caution. Like many organizations, Highwire has invested heavily in this. The only way we've been able to provide that as a service to publishers is that we have a large team of humans as well, and those humans are subject matter experts in a range of disciplines who can validate the output of the alt text being created. Without those humans around, we're not quite there with creating the completely AI generated alt text. I don't think anyone is yet. So worth keeping a close eye on that space. It will add value, but proceed with caution. Another common challenge is the perception that it is only the HTML which matters. It is any digital output, which includes things like PDFs as well. So definitely do make sure that they are included in any accessibility evaluations you are doing. Point number 8 out of 10 here is that this is a really low effort, high value way to just create and share a plan. Anyone enforcing an accessibility standard understands that you can't do everything straight away, but it goes a very long way just to show you have understood the issues and written them down and have good intent to resolve them. So creating a written plan will help you marshal the resources needed to implement it, but also means that any regulatory powers will smile on your cause. It shows goodwill. Speaking to end users is, of course, very, very valuable for any user-centered design project. It's particularly valuable for accessibility because many of those end users are going to have very different requirements to the people actually creating the site and creating the content. So ideally, speaking to end users who do have accessibility constraints is, of course, extremely valuable. But if for whatever reason that is not practical, it is so quick to put a survey on your site. I'm talking maybe an hour to construct some questions, an hour to put a survey on the site, an hour to evaluate the results afterwards. And every time we've done this, the publishers are always surprised by what users say. There's always something where the publishers were completely unaware what the users thought about something. So low effort, high reward on that. And then I think echoing all three of the previous speakers' point, engaging the whole team is probably the #1 recommendation here. If you are the only person in the organization championing accessibility, everything is a battle. If the whole team understands the why of what you're doing, then every single accessibility task you're passing through just goes through much more seamlessly. So training staff, helping them understand it, helping authors understand it, reaps many benefits in the long run. So in summary, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions in the remaining 10 minutes. Accessibility, of course, needs to be a priority for everyone, so that the number of people in the world who benefit from your content increases. And this is millions or tens of millions of people who will be able to access your content. That is a very real target to have, but it doesn't need to be at great expense. There are lean ways of approaching it as well. And that's it from me. I'd love to hear any other suggestions for low effort ways of adding value as well.
Well, thank you very much, Josh. We do have about 10 minutes left for discussion. We'd hope to have a little longer, but One of the things that we will do is take these questions back, provide answers, and then forward those answers out to the participants today. And so, Bill, I think I'm inviting everybody back on. Okay, everyone's on. Rachel had to leave us, but Bill, maybe you'd like to go ahead and start the discussion. And you've had a chance to look through the Q&A. So,
Sure, happy to do that. Basically, I'm not going to answer specific questions because there's a bunch of issues a bunch of different questions around some of these main issues. So one, for example, is we've focused a lot about the textual formats like HTML online and EPUB as a product. What about other formats? What about PDF? What about video, etc.? Quick comment from me, and then I'll see what my colleagues on the call have to say about those. But in my testing engagements, I'm almost always asked to test PDFs as well as EPUBs, and oftentimes the websites by which they're delivered as well. So really all three of those things are part of the picture. EPUBs are HTML is frankly the easiest because it's basically built to be accessible. Almost all accessibility standards are based on HTML and assistive technology, as I mentioned, to the HTML semantic markup. EPUBs are far more accessible than PDFs because if specifically reflowable EPUBs, those are very important for people with low vision, for example, the ability to change line spacing and fonts for dyslexic people, etc. Those are things that can't be done with PDFs, but you can make a PDF more accessible than not, and the standard there is called PDF UA. I could take up the rest of the time just talking about PDF accessibility, so I'll see whether Stacy or Joshua have anything to say about PDFs and maybe a comment or two on video as well, because that's an increasingly important format and a very challenging one, I would say.
Well, perhaps from my point of view, just commenting on video, I think the good news is that many of the video providers are catching up now with accessibility requirements. I remember it's not that long ago when speaking to many of the major providers, it was very low down the list of requirements. Maybe if we have time, I think it was described that as earlier. But many of the providers we work with now do have that as a very real and operational service where, for example, video transcripts can be provided alongside the video or even the XML. You can search within the video. It provides all of the information that you need in terms of metadata as well. So I think that is a good sign.
And closed captions as well, which
virtue.
early on were quite amusing, but have gotten better.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, in
Stacey,
terms of
from your
audio.
personal experience, what works, what doesn't?
Yeah, so just I think for us, we obviously those aspects that you've mentioned, they're getting better, and one of the key things for us, it's one of the hardest things to implement, and one of the most important in video accessibility is audio description. So making sure that you're describing what's happening on the screen. Quite often in scholarly publishing or even education, you'll have videos and it's got some wonderful music behind it and some images and writing, and that means nothing to someone who can't see the screen, or actually to someone who has dyslexia and who can't follow that text quick enough, or who have struggle to read it. And so you know, what we're seeing now is actually synthetic speech being used, and it's becoming very effective and put into a VTT file with timestamps. That I think is going to be the solution going forward for video accessibility. It's a very fast-paced space that's definitely worth watching right now.
We're getting short of time, so I'll bring up another kind of major issue that I saw in the Q&A, which is what things are explicitly included or excluded from the EAA. Now, I'm a consultant, So I'm responsible for advising my clients. And so the first thing I advise them is that I'm not a lawyer, and that they should consult their legal counsel for legal questions. But I will point out that since it's about digital products and services, I would not advise a customer to conclude that journals are not included just because journals are not explicitly mentioned in the document of the directive, because typically those are consumed digitally, they're acquired digitally. My advice is don't delude yourself that you can ignore your journals. That content is important too. And of course, it's very important when the ADA comes along. So Stacy, comments on that, because you publish both.
Yeah, absolutely. As mentioned, we started getting our journals into EPUB back in 2019, and it's something and making those EPUBs more accessible, getting image descriptions. We're building the strategy towards that. So we're not going to be able to do that by April 26. We'll be lucky if we can do it by 2030. But I think one of the key things for any of this, regardless whether it's books or journals, have your strategy in place because it shows a plan, it shows intent and will. And that's certainly what we're doing. We're moving on it now, and it's going to be an uphill struggle, but it's one worth the climb for sure.
One of the vendors that are very prominent in the accessibility space that does a lot of education is DQ. They also provide important tools. I use their tools all the time. In one of their webinars recently, the issue of a 3-year roadmap, detailed 3-year roadmap, that if you have and can show a written detailed 3-year roadmap and that you are making progress on it, that actually counts in your favor if your accessibility is challenged. So that's a very good thing to have. One other quick question related to on the journal question is, are we talking about issues of journals or are we talking about articles? Is it an article-based accessibility, or is it somehow, and particularly with EPUBs, there's always the question of why would you make an HTML journal article into an EPUB? So Stacy, I guess I'd like your comment on that as well.
Again, I think it goes back to what you said a couple of minutes, Bill. It is for us, EPUB is more accessible. It offers more accessibility functionality that you can put in there. Specifically, we talked a bit about metadata. That's very important, and that's you can have that accessibility metadata clear in your EPUBs. Yeah, a lot for us. It's the far superior end user product, especially when you look at things again, as you mentioned, it being reflowable. There's a number of reasons that yes, you can make HTML fairly accessible, but in our view, you'll never make it as accessible as an EPUB.
Excellent. And since we're actually out of time, I'm just going to answer a question that wasn't asked, because there's always questions about metadata. And one thing that I want to mention is, yes, you need to follow the accessibility metadata that's specified in EPUB Accessibility 1.1. And that does specifically say which ones are required and which ones are recommended. So there are distinctions, but don't forget about your ONIX metadata, which is supply chain metadata. And the W3C has also done a very extensive crosswalk. It's specifically based on ONIX code list 196, but once you've got your EPUB metadata, which by the way is identical to schema.org accessibility metadata, because when we developed the EPUB spec, we did it in collaboration with schema.org so that the properties and vocabularies are absolutely identical, whether you're talking about HTML or EPUB. But ONIX is something different, and so you need to do a crosswalk to ONIX. But that's really important, because for a user that's looking for a book or a journal article, they need to know, am I going to be able to consume this? does this have the accessibility features that I as an individual need? So it's really important to get that, and it can actually be quite detailed metadata, but that's something to don't ignore that in your plan, getting your Onyx metadata in shape. And Frank, one last comment is all of these things continue to evolve. So I mentioned, ACE. It's not like there's an annual update. It's updated periodically as needed, and so the key is to just routinely check that you've got the current version of ACE that you're using. Typically, EPUB check, you'll be using the current version, but the same with any of these standards. Kind of pay attention to the standards community. I'm a big advocate of that because it can save you a lot of work. And I think we're a couple minutes over our time, Tony.
Yeah, well, that's there's a lot of information today, a lot of useful information, and as Kushal said in the chat, we will be looking at these questions and providing some answers that we can then distribute. And so I hope everyone